Hey guys, so Sons of the Forest just dropped today in early access, and I wanted to create this best settings guide to help you guys increase your frames per second. So this will probably differ for everybody because everybody has a different and unique gaming setup, but for me, these settings increased my FPS to over 100 frames per second and made it nice and smooth for me to play. So let's get some things out of the way first. Depending on what type of graphics card you have, make sure your drivers are up to date. If you have an AMD driver, go to their website, download their driver and update it if you haven't already. And if you have an NVIDIA graphics card, make sure that you have your drivers up to date in NVIDIA GeForce Experience. If you don't have that, go to nvidia.com, download their NVIDIA GeForce Experience, and once you open it, you'll see the driver tab. You click that, check for updates, and if you have one, download it. If you don't, you're all set. Once you have that out of the way, you can now open up your game and load in. Once loaded in, open up your settings and you'll see your display tab. For me, I'm playing on an Asus 2560 by 1440p 2K resolution monitor, and I have the game set in full screen mode. Make sure that you max out your FPS right here so you can get the best FPS possible. Now you have to fool around with this, but I have VSync turned off. This actually made my game lose FPS and stutter. You can choose to leave it on or turn it off. This is up to you, but in this case, I left it off because the game feels much more better without it. Now, if we head over to the graphics tab, you'll see quality. I fooled around with this for about an hour trying to figure out what will give me the best FPS without making the game look like crap. The game still looks visually beautiful. It runs very smooth. So I skipped past quality preset and went to draw distance. I was able to gain FPS by putting the draw distance down to ultra low. You can leave it at low and still gain FPS, but you don't see too much of a difference graphically when you go from ultra to even ultra low. I'd rather take the smoother gameplay than seeing a tree a mile away. For ambient occlusion, I turned this to low, and I also gained FPS. If you don't know what ambient occlusion is, well, in graphics, ambient occlusion is a showing technique used to make 3D objects look more realistic by simulating the soft shadows that should naturally occur when indirect or ambient lighting is cast out onto your scene. In this case, things still appear to look gorgeous even when I turned it off. You'll probably see the difference once you have structures built, but in this case, I do not have a shelter built as of yet, so we'll have to fool around when that time comes. So one of the first things I noticed is the amount of fog in this game. There was a lot of it, and my 3070 did not like that, so I turned fog off and I was actually able to see a lot of the things I wouldn't see otherwise, and it gave me more FPS and the game felt smoother when just looking around. It's a cool effect, but if you want some more FPS and the ability to see things behind fog, just turn it off. So now let's move on to the Anisotropic Textures, if I'm saying that correctly. This just makes distant objects and games look sharper. I did not see a very big impact on performance here, so I just left it on. I turned shadow quality down because I don't really care for shadows to look too intense, and it does have an impact on FPS in certain games. Now for clouds, grass, and water, I turned all of these settings to low. Clouds still look like clouds, the grass still looks sharp and pretty, and the water still looks good. There is a visual difference, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't really look too much worse. It just looks a little different. If you can sacrifice what the clouds look like above you, unless you're a stargazer and constantly looking at the sky, then you can keep this on. But if you can sacrifice what the clouds look like, or if there's more foliage around you, or if there's a film on the water when it's moving, turn these off because trust me, you will see an FPS jump. Now for parallax distance, I kept this to high because parallax refers to the fact that when you move, objects closer to you appear to be displaced more than an object further away from you. This effect is used to give the illusion of depth, so I like this feature, so I just kept it on. And billboard quality and texture resolution, I also kept it to high and full so I can get the most appealing texture visuals I can. Now on to features. For anti-aliasing, I kept that to TAA, and I keep the dynamic resolution set to DLSS. I fooled around with this and turned it off, and the game felt awful for me. Quickly turned it back on and kept the DLSS on quality because when I tried it on performance, it didn't change much in terms of smoothness, but the visuals did not look that great, so I kept this on quality. I kept screen space reflection because this didn't seem to change much for me, and I instantly turned off motion blur. For micro shadowing and contact shadows, I turned these off, and chromatic aberration I kept on. If anyone is wondering what chromatic aberration is, it's a screen space technique that simulates lens distortion and commonly used to give your scene like a little bit more cinematic feel to it. I just kept that on. Now lastly, on to style. The only thing here is film grain. For me, I don't really care about film grain in games because because I don't like that added noise it adds to the picture. It's supposed to add like a realism effect to the game, but for me, I just turned it off. This is up to you, as I did not see really much of a difference in FPS when it was toggled on, so that's totally up to you. Now let's move over to the gameplay tab. In this tab, you're gonna see camera, and this is where you can change your FOV, which is your field of view. Now, just so you know, FOV can affect your FPS, but I do suggest you play around with this and pick what you like, because even though it does affect your FPS, it's not too significant to ruin your view in the game. So for me, I found a good balance at 85 FOV, where it does take away a little bit of FPS, but not too much. I am able to see more and it feels great. I also put this up to 95 to test it out, which is the max FOV in Sons of the Forest, and it looked absolutely awesome, but it did take away over 10 FPS for me, so I brought it back down a little bit and I managed to kind of just keep around 85, and it feels great. Now play around with it and see where you like it the most. If it's really hurting your FPS, then turn it down. If it's not making much of a difference, set it to where you like it and where you feel comfortable, because the biggest thing is, you know, we want to have fun playing the game. Now I left the GUI section untouched and the gameplay section untouched, but did fool around with big head mode. If you do not know what this does, here's an example of big head mode. It's absolutely hilarious. These should make for some funny content down the line. Alright guys, so that's it for now. Fool around with the settings, and if it doesn't work for you, see what does. Everybody has a different setup, so this worked for me, and I was able to go from spawning in with 52 frames per second to now averaging around 95 to over 100. So I hope this helps some of you guys, and if I helped you in any way, hit that like button, subscribe for more guides, tips, and gameplay in the future. Have a good day, everyone.